to clean up our environment. This meeting is being recorded, by the way, so if you want a recording, Enid could make it happen for you in the future. Flood awareness, we know that, we could do great things, but unless people have awareness, it's a real challenge. Innovative studies, the city continues to bring in top of class consultants to develop ideas and strategies to make the city more resilient. What we try to do with the chamber is sort of connect and make a bridge, between the business community leadership, the city leadership, the staff that works for the city, of course, and all the consultants. And we try to provide input, ideas, and in a very collaborative, healthy dialogue that we feel we have with city leadership. We know that there's no blueprint to future-proof cities, especially coastal cities, to the impacts of climate change. So we always come with an open mind, and I think that these kind of sessions that we have once a month with this task force, we just try to explore great ideas and the best ideas that are available. Today we have the pleasure of having Daniel Odess of GlobalPro with us, and Daniel and I have been friends. He's also friends with our dear Wayne Pathman and Jerry Libin. And Daniel has been active in the chamber. He's, really, I think, groundbreaking in what he's doing with GlobalPro. And I think that really GlobalPro, to me, is really where the rubber hits the road in terms of protecting the city itself, the physical city, with building assets. And he works primarily in the private sector, but has great collaborations also with municipalities. So he'll talk to us today about, this whole experience that you have with a company like his. We also invited our friends from the Construction Council and the Real Estate Council to participate today. This has relevance to both of those councils. And without further ado, Daniel will walk us through his presentation. We'll go through about 15-20 minutes, and then we'll do some Q&A with Daniel. Daniel, welcome.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that, guys. Certainly is it my turn to share the screen here?
Yes, I have to stop sharing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All right.
Okay, there you go. Now you share.
Well, first off, definitely want to obviously thank the Chamber for the opportunity to speak with all of you about important issues that are obviously impacting our local market here. I want you all to take away from this meeting or my presentation information that we can use to better implement the resiliency efforts. I am a contractor. I own development sites. I'm all for progress. I'm a big proponent of development and growth. This is not to say that it's not, but as we walk through the different slides and we talk about the particular issues, what I'm trying to highlight is how insurance is responding to these changes and to these resiliency efforts and the consequence of them, because with all good change, sometimes there are unnecessary or bad byproduct, and you want to try to mitigate those issues as much as we can, as particularly from an insurance perspective. And we need insurance. Obviously, we need to protect our assets. Insurance is important, and there's major changes coming to NFIP in October and beyond that all of us should be aware of, particularly as homeowners, especially if you're looking to buy a new home, which many people are flocking to this area to do. And also a full disclosure, I got my second dose of my vaccine yesterday, and it is certainly not a fun experience. I didn't want to miss this opportunity to talk about these important issues, but I did have a restless night, and it's been a long day. So I'm going to try to run through this stuff, answer any questions you guys have, and because I really truly think these are really important issues, and I don't think these are issues that get enough attention because we're focused on the forward-thinking resiliency efforts, and I think a little bit of a focus on the insurance implications of those during the progress, that while you're making that progress forward, how insurance companies are responding for those that were in and around those areas that may have been damaged by these projects. And there's many different examples of it throughout South Florida. And we've literally been right at the center of it. We've been called in by whether the local municipalities, the business communities, homeowners, and we've represented any number of them in dealing with situations that are the result of the resiliency efforts. And so this is just to give you a little bit of an update on what's going on in the insurance world and how insurance is responding to damages caused by these resiliency efforts, whether it's vibrations, seawall improvements, pollution issues, things like that, and also changes in legislation as it's coming up. So without further ado, I'm going to share my presentation here. Hope all of you can see that. All right. To kick it off, who we are, GlobalPro, insurance services firm. We like to say we are white glove concierge. We represent significant developers, builders, homeowners, high net worth individuals, and thousands of community associations throughout the South Florida region. And we also have offices in Washington, D.C., New York, Orlando, and Florida, and soon to be Texas. And our team is comprised of licensed professionals and many things other than insurance. And the reason for that is like we want to make sure that when dealing with complex insurance issues, we can address issues regarding the legalities, the interpretation of these contracts, whether or forensic accounting work that needs to be done, or construction drawings that need to be reviewed to understand how to put the properties back together, or what may have caused the issue, the collapse, or the vibrations, et cetera. So we're uniquely qualified, as it says in the slide, to provide these insurance services to primarily policyholders. We have represented, as I mentioned, municipalities in the past. We've represented the business community as well as high net worth individuals. And we have a tremendous amount of experience. We deal with hundreds of claims every year, and we've recovered more than $1 billion in damages. This is our process. We believe that the insurance process is cyclical. It starts with that first policy you buy, and it continues, and it never really stops. Once you're into that cycle, you're getting ready for the event that something were to occur by simply buying an insurance or putting into continuity plans, perhaps even resiliency plans. And then when you have a loss or experience it, that's the recovery phase. You want to make sure that you're getting everything you're entitled to from either your insurance or a third party's insurance. Obviously, as much as you can, or you're legally entitled to. You want to make sure that you're not wasting your time in dealing with claims or making claims against parties that you can't recover against. And I think some of the resiliency efforts have led down that path where many people get frustrated with trying to recover against many different parties that simply they're not going to recover from. And then there's the rebuilding. What is it going to take to put it back together so that when the process starts all over again, that you're protecting your insurable interest and making sure that you're making smart decisions for your business, your community, whether community association or for you as an individual. A lot of times people will do things after they get a recovery that actually lends itself to further issues down the road, whether it's prejudicing their own rights to getting insurance, to not properly documenting things, and then creating confusion between where the loss was caused by or how it may have occurred. As I've mentioned several times, we have a diverse amount of different clientele. Myself, I'm a licensed general contractor. I'm a licensed public adjuster. I also hold a license as an insurance agent. I've been through engineering school and started a master's in civil engineering and construction management. As I mentioned before, I do actively build. We own a number of different sites. We're in the process of actually redeveloping a project in Alapata and going through the tough road of getting approvals and financing and doing all those things. So again, on the ground, seeing it firsthand, understanding what it's like to deal with these changes. So insurance challenges that disrupt progress. And the reason for the title is that sometimes insurance, the way in which it reacts, does disrupt, okay? And the reason why it's disrupting is that you can't protect yourself against the risk, and whether you want to shoulder that risk or not, ultimately it will be a factor in your decision as to whether or not you're going to move forward. One of those particular issues that we're dealing with right now throughout South Florida is, as you can see in the picture, concrete issues, concrete overspray particularly. There's a tremendous amount of properties in the South Florida region that are getting battered by concrete overspray as new buildings are being built. And more recently, insurance companies are taking the position that the damages that are caused by the overspray, whether it's from stucco or concrete, is actually excluded due to provisions regarding pollution. But we also need cognizant of where else that concrete's going. Is it going into our waterways? Is it going into our parks? Is it falling on actual people and their cars? There's this confusion between this idea of a protective safeguard versus a duty to protect. When I sit down and talk to a lot of risk managers for general contracting companies, they want to focus on the protective safeguards. They want to cite to their manuals about what the manual says or what the building code says, which may not do a good enough job in order to fully fulfill their job and the duty to protect. You're seeing a lot of unprotected buildings where they're doing massive amounts of concrete work where they don't have the proper fall protections in place for debris, not for human life. They have prevailing winds that are 20 to 40, if not even higher, miles per hour, depending on the height of the building, with absolutely nothing around the building to stop this concrete and debris from falling on neighboring properties. And you started seeing this trend towards these good neighbor agreements leading to shortfalls in reserves for repairs. It was very attractive to some associations to enter into these good neighbor agreements because they may be hamstrung and don't have the money. We're coming out of a bad economic time due to the pandemic or other factors. And $250,000 now may seem like a lot of money, but when they actually go do the repair to mitigate or fix the issues related to, let's say, the so-called pollution issues, they can't get coverage, and $250,000 is just not enough. We had one instance where the contractor offered $100,000 and the claim was settled for more than 11 million. So there's massive discrepancies between the desire to mitigate the issue and to actually institute some duty to protect, rather than just simply looking at the minimum requirement. And this is a growing issue. And now with the trend towards excluding these damages, we actually saw one insurer, a fairly large insurance company, exit the market, largely due to a slew of these claims that were being made. And the size of these losses were in the millions upon millions of dollars. So now you have insurance companies trying to pervert certain policy language to construe it to be something other than what it is, which is an incident where they're actually trying to argue that you as the damaged party didn't do enough to protect your building from the actual damage. But then again, when you're sitting in a 40 to 50 story tower, what can you possibly do to protect your building from the flying concrete that's coming off the building next door? There's not much you can do in the way of protecting, but they're using the provisions of the policy to say that you somehow didn't do enough. So this is a growing trend. It's something that we need to be aware of as more projects get improved and the buildings are built closer and closer together, or you have increase in density, something that should be taken into consideration as you move forward. The next thing that we typically see is seawall issues in coastal, properties that border the coastal areas. There's always a desire to obviously improve the seawall. You can obtain certain credits on insurance to do it. Unfortunately, the care that's being taken to protect the existing walls in and around them has led to any number of claims that we have handled. Unfortunately, most of these claims are not covered by under your first party insurance policy. That would be the policy purchased by the party that sustained the damage. So while the new building is going up and the new seawall is being built, it's causing failures in the neighboring property, whether it's ground cover collapse, which is most often specifically excluded in policies, to actual damage and cracking in existing walls, maybe because of the shoring methods that were used. We've seen a number of instances where they brought in larger or heavier hammers or drilling devices to put the shoring in necessary to put the seawalls in. That's not part of the permit or in the approved set of drawings. But seemingly, again, there's this ignorance when it comes to progress, where no matter what it costs, move forward. But you got to understand that the party that which you're damaging can't most often get recovery for this unless they specifically have coverage for it. So we need to consider that. Vibrations. I can't tell you how many claims we've handled Similar to the seawall construction, putting the piles and the shoring in, and using pneumatic compactors to flatten areas of land, to build foundations, leads to damage nearby. And again, the ignorance I talked about with regards to seawall construction, because they can't achieve what the plans require, rather than going back for approvals, we're just simply increasing the machinery in order to achieve our goal for our project without consideration for the damages nearby. And there's this, as I write here, state of denial and denied claims. Most insurance companies like to take the position that these claims are not covered, but in most policies they are. So there is this bit of a state of denial and denied claims going on with regards to these claims. And we've handled these types of claims for infrastructure, whether it was up and down Alton Road to the Florida Keys, as well as in the Edgewater construction zone area, and various other places as well as in Fort Lauderdale. These are prevalent claims. Most people don't think they can recover for it. Most people don't think that they should bother dealing with these things. There's so many different protective measures that you as a contractor or builder can do to protect your neighbor's property, such as reflectors and monitoring devices and adhering to the drawings and the plans, and making sure it's done. And if you don't think this is prevalent, you're totally mistaken. We see these claims on a almost daily basis where people are complaining about some sort of issue as it relates to the actual earthwork that's being done even before the project comes up out of the ground and they get damaged by the flying concrete. So again, another consideration, elevated grade. This is the photograph behind the slide is actually of Sardinia. Soon after they elevated the road, NFIP took the position when it was flooded shortly thereafter, that suddenly the restaurant was a basement, without even consideration of the fact that just because my neighbor increases their grade doesn't suddenly mean that I'm below grade. That's their new grade. And we got involved. We overturned the denial for Sardinia and several others in the Sunrise Harbor area. They all received compensation eventually, but it took many, many, many months. And depending on the margins of certain businesses, this could put them out of business. And I quite frankly, I think there's some consideration that could have been made. There could have been a discussion up front with regards to the consequences, insurance consequences of elevating roads and doing these things that should have entered the conversation at some point, perhaps even a conversation with NFIB. Maybe there was, and it fell on deaf ears. I just know that when I got there, we had the denial letter in hand, and we were able to reverse that for a number of the businesses in that area. But this isn't just exclusive to that area. We have several homeowners on Miami Beach that their properties ended up getting flooded shortly after hard rains where, and we'll see it in another slide, where protective safeguards were not in place to control silt and runoff from the infrastructure upgrade for the pumps and whatnot, and led to a lot of flooding on their properties and substantially damaged one of our clients' pools, which was 6 figures of damages in order to repair it. So again, it's important to consider these things. And I mentioned here as well in this slide about the vibrations and the construction debris. It is prevalent when they're doing this road construction, whether it was in the Keys or whether it was in Miami or in other parts of the country where we've seen these efforts to put in pump systems. It's dirty work, and without the right protocols in place to control the dust and debris and the vibrations, consideration is that when the pneumatic compactors in the center of the road versus on the edge of the road, how significant are those vibrations and can it possibly cause damage? And we actually had a historical property slip off its foundation, and we ultimately had to sue the homeowner's insurance company. Nearly almost went to trial. It took over 2 years to get the recovery for damages caused by this infrastructure upgrade. So it's certainly something to consider. Something that a lot of you may be aware of now, but in 2017, after Hurricane Irma, there was an epidemic of claim denials related to wind-driven rain, because suddenly rain driven by wind in a hurricane was something other than hurricane. It was probably the first time that in history that claims were denied or limited for this type of provision. But as we talk about progress and resiliency, we should consider more about things above the first floor. And as we build and we go upward, how is the insurance companies and what products are they selling, and how is it going to protect us as we start to recover? Because a lot of the issues that we saw in some slides we're going to get into in here in a second is a massive slew of exasperated defect issues in current construction practices for new buildings, which allowed water to enter properties in some cases. In other cases, it was simply because issues of poor workmanship. And the reality, though, is that ensuing damage from workmanship is actually covered, was argued to be something other than wind-driven rain. We saw a tremendous amount of recovery here. Push came to shove, a lot of the insurance companies came to the table. But I don't think that a lot of people realize that where we have non-admitted insurers, they were selling policies that required a lot of our community associations to go to New York, the seat of arbitration, to resolve their disputes. Was in New York. It's a very costly process. It was applying New York law to a Florida claim. Again, these are all things that can stifle progress because you have associations that are underfunded and can't afford to pursue these claims and these damages despite them largely being entitled to these recoveries. So it's something to consider and something to be aware of. Again, changes in insurance is our focus here. So some of the things that are going on right now in legislation that you might not be aware of on the insurance side, and I'm focusing on consumer rights, obviously. There was a recent change in assignment of benefit laws. It was said to be focused on restricting these bad players, these contractors, from stealing money from policyholders, and I'm summarizing really generally. Ultimately, though, like we see with most insurance legislation, it didn't as much restrict the contractors' practices as it did the actual policyholders' rights to actually assign its claim. And certainly not going to bore everyone with a conversation about why that is to the detriment of us as policyholders. But I can tell you that particularly when you're talking about resiliencies and rebuilding and trying to move and progress forward, and we're in an area which is prone to damages and there may be redevelopment opportunities, you now have issues regarding your ability to actually assign the damages or that claim value to a would-be buyer, if you will. And what happened here is that the legislation actually passed a law which required the policyholder to police the contractors rather than so much as restricting the contractors themselves. And if you don't know this, right now, Senate Bill 76 is being proposed, which substantially reduces coverage for roof and payments. And it says there at the slide, it'll codify into statute the ability for insurers to offer ACV coverage for roofs based on a schedule referring to the material and age of the roof. After Wilma, we saw a rollback of RCV payments to ACV payments, and now we're actually seeing some sort of rollback from ACV payments. So again, we continue to have to pay at RCV values, and you're continuing to see unique and different ways to significantly reduce the amount of exposure for these insurance companies, despite the cost of insurance rising astronomically. And again, as we're talking about progress forward and a city that needs cash and resources to rebuild and rebound from loss and disaster, and we're planning for issues of flood, consider what's going on above ground and how these changes in legislation and laws may impact the city's ability to recover, rebuild from loss and damage. Flood coverage, as I mentioned earlier, in October, we're going to see some changes there with regards to premiums, particularly in the coastal areas, huge increases. So that's coming. They want to basically get on par with the private sector and the rates that are charged theirs rather than being continue to create a massive debt. But what's important here is that there's a lot of misunderstanding and misconceptions regarding what actually is covered by flood, where in the building you can get coverage for it, what in fact means flood, and also the mitigation efforts or the resiliency efforts to protect your property from flood, such as flood panels. We represented several association properties in downtown Brickell that it was quite obvious that had it not been for the flood panels in and around the newer buildings, that these older buildings would not nearly have sustained as much damage the flood levels on these buildings was significantly higher than others in the area that were not directly adjacent to these buildings with the flood panels. So while we're preventing damage to the building itself, our building, again, a consideration for the areas around it, we also had properties where, again, silt controls are not being maintained, which increased flow out of the bay, which leads to substantially more damage. So there is a active effort before a hurricane when we're in the cone to go secure materials above ground. I have witnessed lesser efforts to ensure that the silt controls are in place to control flow and silt as it moves to the city during a flooding event. And again, with the further restrictions on what is covered and how it's going to be paid, it's an important consideration to take into account. So some construction trends. Prior to the pandemic, Florida saw new residential constructions annually increase 2% and 14% year over year. And now we're seeing an increase of the 12%. Why that's relevant, again, as it relates to 558 issues, if you look at some of the top issues, number of claims, defective products, faulty workmanship, maintenance, we're in a time of innovation. We're in a time where we're trying to build resilient properties, buildings, infrastructure, and these issues of 558 issues are rampant, perhaps, or maybe it's a cottage industry of attorneys and engineers and contractors that see an opportunity to make money. I can tell you firsthand, I'm a little bit bewildered by the use of new materials that are supposed to be protecting these buildings from sustaining damage, and how often they do in fact fail, and the length of time it takes to actually litigate and recover for these issues, and these associations that quite frankly cannot shoulder the burden of long litigation, construction defect litigation, typically on average 2 to 10 years. And I've seen cost estimates from law firms sent to associations or business owner clients that expect the fees to exceed $1 million before they get a recovery. So it's something to be mindful of, because what we're seeing now is that insurance companies, where they used to kind of take a back seat to these types of claims, are actually coming to the forefront and defending and paying them earlier. And with that trend towards that, how is that going to impact our insurance if the more prevalent claims are in fact the defective workmanship and product issues? And what can we do as we're building a resilient city? Look at these issues and how it may impact us down the road. Ironically, the 558 statute was designed to actually be an alternative method to resolve construction disputes that would reduce the need for litigation. But I can assure you, if you pick up the phone and contact many of these community associations, it's certainly not, in large part, not always, obviously, disclaimer. In most part, it's certainly not resolving much of anything, and a lot of it is going towards litigation, and it's taking a significant amount of time. And again, trying to build a resilient city, we're trying to move forward, and we're basically taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back in a lot of cases. So claims are on the rise. High growth rate of construction combined with a low unemployment rate creates an environment prone to tight schedules, poor workmanship, and subpar quality control and quality assurance. Certainly something you don't want to hear as we're planning for a resilient city, as we're trying to build a city that can sustain and recover faster and better from loss and damage. So we need to look at the construction practices. Many of the issues that I talked about here are construction practices that are specific to South Florida that I didn't see when I was building in Greater New York or Washington, D.C. And when I came down here, it was remarkable to see some of the practices that were on job sites. It was pretty shocking. So some solutions. Obviously, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news and just talk about the problems. I just, as part of the resiliency discussion, involve a discussion about insurance, more so than just flood, more so than maybe just your general property insurance. A lot of focus is on homeowners. We talk a lot about homeowners, and when it comes to legislation changes, but we should also be looking at how these changes are actually impacting larger infrastructure like condominium high-rise buildings, hotels, community centers. That needs to be part of that conversation because those claims are significant and those buildings are being damaged just like anything else. Review of current insurance coverage case law and claims adjusting practices. They are constantly changing. The claims adjusting practices is something that we track and we constantly are trying to keep up with here at GlobalPro. One day an insurance company is paying for something, the next day they're calling it pollution. So being aware of those issues can help city planning as it relates to permitting the process and the what is required in order to protect neighboring properties from these damages. And I've always considered a matrix of current building codes, policy conditions, and insurance and construction laws to help decision makers. I've never seen anything like it. And I think that unfortunately, insurance is not much of a conversation as it relates to some of the resiliency planning that is going on. And instances like we saw in Sunrise Harbor. I think if there was an earlier discussion about what could potentially happen there, or how a policy is going to respond to it, I think it may have helped avoid the uncertain fate and delay of a business owner getting paid to be able to recover and to continue progressing forward. So a brief summary here. The city seems hyper-focused on risk mitigation to achieve their goal of more resilient and sustainable infrastructure and properties. We would argue that there needs to be heavy consideration on the implications of damages caused by these mitigation plans relating to the owners and operators' insurable interest in their property. And a little about us. A lot of people sometimes ask, when do you call a company like us? And we have a campaign now, which is call us first. Whether it's from planning to preparing, obtaining new insurance, to recovering from loss or rebuilding. We encourage everyone to call us first. We want to be a part of the conversation. That's why I've always been involved in the local community here and doing my part to continue to give back. And as a community, the first thing we do after every major disaster is my team is on the ground doing charitable efforts through our Care Foundation to help our community recover. It is absolutely important for us, and we want to be part of the conversation. So we look for the invitations, and we hope that you continue. And every Thursday, well, this week it'll be Friday because it'll be our 9-year anniversary of being in business, and I count down to 10 years. We do a recovery report live. It's about a 15-20 minute segment on insurance information that's impacting business owners and community associations. That's the big focus of it, where we talk about many of the issues that we just went over here today. And with that being said, I'm all wrapped up.
Very well. Fantastic. Let me see in the chat. Do we have any questions in the chat?
I just want to make a comment. The Chamber has already utilizes Daniel Odess and GlobalPro's services, and I have to say, the pro in the name is so accurate. You guys are really on target. We called your office, and right away, you scheduled an appointment with us. You came several times out, and guided us through the process. As you mentioned, if you don't know all of the details and all of the things that you're entitled to, you can get swamped with the whole process. So thank you very much. Very, very, very professional.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that was not prompted. I appreciate that.
Testimony of your professionalism.
Yes, I appreciate that.
We have Wayne Pathman participating. I'm not sure if Wayne has some thoughts or some questions for you. Wayne?
Hey, Daniel, how are you?
I'm well. How are you, sir?
Good. Thank you for doing this for the Chamber today.
Absolutely.
Looks like the pandemic hasn't really affected you much. You look the same.
Well, I got my vaccine yesterday, the second dose, so I'm a little red in the face. So I'm getting through. Yes,
I noticed that. I thought maybe you were just out on the boat tanning and fishing.
No. I got a little sweat going on here, but we'll get through the chills.
Okay. Hey, I got into the call a little bit late, about 10-15 minutes late, but I was wondering, in the news lately has been a lot of discussion about, and Reinaldo knows my favorite topic, about insurance and flood insurance and everything. What are you seeing from your end? The article, I think today or yesterday in the Herald, was that they're going to hold off on raising rates But the inside information I'm hearing is that when the raises do come, they're going to be significant and continue to climb significantly over the next 5 years, but that they're holding back because of the pandemic and everything else that everybody's been going through. So what are you hearing? What do you see over the next, let's say 3 years?
I'm hearing that they're a little tired of holding back. And I think the holding back is kind of a double-edged sword for us as taxpayers and also as policy holders. The forms are changing too. There's obviously a lot of focus on the rates. The rates are supposed to be significant. For an existing property owner, you're grandfathered in. There's a little bit of a law in there that kind of restricts what year-over-year increases can be. I believe it's like 4 to 18%, somewhere around there. I can look it up. There was a Forbes article that was just written yesterday. But if they do that increase over 3 years, though, because most of that impact is going to be in the coastal areas, particularly South Florida. It's South Florida, California, and like 2 other states, New York being one of them as well, that are going to see the brunt of these increases, more so than most other places in the country. And for new homeowners, they're talking about where you're going to have financing issues on properties, and you're not going to be able to sell your property because people can't qualify to buy it simply because of the cost of insurance. And if you've gone through the loan process, that they always take into account the cost of your insurance. It's something that most of us probably just kind of look past, and we're just really focused on the awesome rate that we're getting right now in the market. But the reality is that I think what's going to come more and more to the forefront is not the mortgage rate. It's how much insurance am I going to have to pay for this property? And that goes for both residential and commercial, because you're just seeing changes across the board. So for us that live in, these flood areas, myself being one of them, I live on the water in Coconut Grove. It's going to be a real big hit. I mean, I'm already seeing massive increases in wind insurance. You saw some community associations see thousands of percentage in increases who didn't even have a claim, no claims at all, and saw thousands of percentage increase just in their wind insurance and their all of their perils casualty coverage. Now you compound that with a massive increase in flood insurance. You're talking about completely disrupting reserve studies, project planning. It's going to be it's going to change things. And if you aren't looking at it and considering it, I mean, even if let's say it gets pushed back from October, which is when it's first supposed to go into effect, if it gets pushed off until 2022 because of the pandemic, it doesn't matter. It's going to come at some point. So the reality of it is that if you're not taking into account this in your finances now, whether you're a business owner or a homeowner or a community association, you're kidding yourself. In fact, I sat at a table with several community associations recently to do the reserve studies, and we already started charting out major increases in 2022 and beyond.
Okay, well, thank you. I see the same thing, and as I've been advocating for a long time, that insurance is going to kind of drive the market, especially over the next 10 years. But I did read, like I said, it was either today or yesterday, that they're going to hold off the rate increases for at least now, but they're coming, and over time they're going to be significant. One other question for you. In the past, if we've had pardon me?
I wanted to say one last thing was that about the flood thing is that there's this idea that, and if you look at the studies, that I think it's some like 20%, the lesser impacted properties account for most of the actual premium being paid, despite the fact that it's the coastal higher value dollar properties that are sustaining the damages. So there's this uneven distribution of risk and cost, whereas those that are less likely to sustain damage are paying for the insurance for those that are more likely to sustain the damage. So that's what they're trying to do, is change that pendulum. That's what they're saying. Yep.
Thank you. One of the things I've noticed over the last few years more and more is that in the old days, if we had a storm, hurricane, or a major storm and made a claim, there wasn't a lot of differentiation between, your flood insurance policy and your regular policy, and they weren't, your main policy for windstorm and everything. They weren't saying, oh no, you have to get that covered under your flood. Now I see a clear distinction in every claim or clients telling me that, well, they say that's not due to the windstorm, that's due to flood or rising water. And the coverage that you can get from the government is so little compared to the damage that it could cause. What do you recommend as far as excess flood insurance? And is that something that you're recommending or seeing more and more?
Well, yeah, I mean, we have a number of claims still pending in the Florida Keys where you had engineers on behalf of the insurance companies go out and say that the house fell down because of the flooding. And when you actually do a survey of the area and you look at the data regarding the flooding in certain areas, there really wasn't much of anything. And that's been a problem for years. Galveston saw that issue. Many, coastal areas in New Orleans see the same issue. Florida is no different. We frequently see where there's, significant catastrophic loss following a hurricane, this confusion over whether it's the flood that caused the home to fall down or was it the wind. The fact is you can do pretty credible studies into this, and you can pinpoint through vector analysis exactly what the conditions of the property and disprove it. And we are a part of the class action lawsuit against the forensic engineering firm after Superstorm Sandy in 2012, which was modifying reports to blame everything on flood as opposed to wind. And it was one of our clients' claims. It was the engineer that blew the whistle on it, as well as others. It wasn't just us. But that stuff has happened. That has happened historically. It happened after Andrew, after it happened Sandy. I'm sure it happened many times. Again, it's convenient, but can be disproved, and you certainly need to take efforts to do that. As far as excess insurance, if you can get it, if it's available to you, understand that it's not going to give you any more coverage than the underlying NFIP policy. It'll simply give you more dollars, not coverage. Okay, so it's not going to cover more. It simply follows the underlying NFIP policy. So you can increase your limits, let's say from the 250 to $1 million, but you're not going to get paid for anything different in that excess policy in most regards. So just if you can afford it, great. But just know that there's a lot of people have the misconception if I get an excess policy, oh, I'm covered to $1 million. No, you're covered for the same things up to $1 million.
Right, and that's actually what I meant is that what I'm seeing more is that the insurance companies that are providing your windstorm are saying, no, that's flood related, and therefore you need to get that covered under flood. And we're obviously having a lot more flood problems with storms that have a lot of rain. And then if you only have 250,000, it seems like a very small amount, and the cost of excess is very, still relatively cheap. So when I had my house, I carried another $1 million, cost me, like $300 extra for the year, but I had $2,250,000 in coverage for flood incidences. So that's really the point I was trying to make.
Yeah, and I think for community associations and large building infrastructure, you're almost required to consider that and to get that coverage. There's parabolic. There's other types of insurance too that are covering for damages as a result of wind and flood that are based on various other factors. Just be careful. Understand what it means. Just because it sounds good in the marketing brochure doesn't mean it actually in practice does what it says it's going to do. So you're seeing a rise in some of these alternative products in the market, and it's going to continue changing. I mean, there needs to be a solution. It's a prevalent issue, and unfortunately, in the coastal areas, it's an obvious risk. But how is it going to impact us down the road? And also too, while we try to build a resilient city and we get these credits for doing these things, at what cost did it come to our neighbor? And just in consideration for that, and part of the conversation as we're project planning and executing on those projects, I think is very important.
I don't know if you mentioned it in the early part, but any update on how well pandemic claims are going for loss of business and what's happening from state to state?
It'll be a long.
I knew that bring a smile to your face.
the reality of it is that, and something we've been saying from day one, and if you actually go back to look at some of our earlier broadcasts on the recovery report, we talk about how be wary of the one size fits all. You had a lot of law firms, selling this opportunity to really go after insurance companies when your issue may not have been similar or like someone else's. And unfortunately, you have a very confusing set of case law right now and opinions coming out of various different jurisdictions all over the country. But one of the overriding and one of the most one of the things that's resonating with us most is that they are supporting our approach to it and our opinions, which was look at your own. So don't get so distracted by these organizations and big law firms that are pushing these class action lawsuits. If they're successful, then there'll be a downstream benefit to you. But the reality of it is that so many of the issues are so specific to the way in which you responded to it, to the type of insurance you bought and when you bought it, to how your insurance was renewed. You're seeing so many insurance companies right now renew insurance and add in a specific exclusion for pandemics and specifically COVID-19. Well, if it didn't exist before, then how was it not covered? It's a very simple question, but unfortunately it gets convoluted and mixed up into all these other assertions that a lot of other people are making with regards to these broad stroking issues regarding these government ordinances and a huge hyper focus on that, as opposed to the physical damage and the opinions of many experts that this is in fact physical damage or loss, and the use of the conjunction or and what that means in the context of insurance policy and how important that is. One of the biggest breakthroughs is where you had the use of the word "of" in that sentence and how that's impacted coverage and how they won on that issue. And they beat the summary judgment filed by the insurance company. I'm not an attorney, not giving legal advice, and I would encourage all of you to, that you are business owners that did suffer a loss. Don't just give up on it because you just read the last headline or someone told you something. Unless you've done an analysis of your policy and you've looked at specific issues related to your claims, you really don't know whether or not you're actually going to get covered. And just because you don't get paid today or they deny your claim today doesn't mean that you're not going to get paid, because in fact, I just showed you about like 7 or 8 examples maybe of various claims that at one point probably were denied for various different insurers that all got paid. Okay. So, and to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. This is not over. We'll continue fighting this. We're going to continue advocating. We have handled virus-related claims in the past with success and got recovery. So what's different about this is how it's impacted the world, really on a world stage. So it's a little bit different.
Daniel, you also mentioned in your presentation that you're looking at materials that are failing that cause damage. What kind of materials are you looking at when you say those kind of observations?
Windows. Stucco systems. You're seeing a rise in mechanical related claims. Quite frankly, Reinaldo, I know you obviously being an architect and having designed some of these beautiful buildings. If you name the system, there's probably been some type of issue. I mean, we've had a number of buildings with appliance related issues. It's because of a complete lack of coordination and execution of how they've installed things. Again, there's this race right now because the market's hot. It's no different than, the last, rise and fall of the market, right? So we were very busy in 2010 through 2014 or 15 in construction related losses. And thereafter, and again, we're seeing a lot of them again. And it's really, there's nothing I would actually say, let me say this, there's very little that we're not seeing issues with. But I would say that certainly the windows is definitely an issue. Cladding issues, let's say it's windows, stucco systems, and mechanical systems are really a hot button right now with regards to the execution and what they're leading to.
Do you see it mostly as a quality control installation defect issue, or the quality of the original specification that was used?
Well, I included that quote in here, from this Claims magazine here, and I think as they acknowledge and they point out, it's a combination of multiple things. It's that race to be done first. It's that race to get started. It's the race to turn units over. And where you fall within that, and what occurred before or after you, as you put together construction schedules, and we look at the critical path here, where you as a subcontractor are going to get pulled into the mix, and how is it going to impact your work product and timing of getting the job done. And again, we want to, as contractors, developers, builders, you want to meet that demand, right? You want to sell a product, but you can't sell it unless you deliver it, right? And close. So by all means possible, get it done. But I think we're skipping some environmental things though, and doing that, as I mentioned before. So while you talked about a certain material, whether cladding, something like that, I'll be honest with you, some of the environmental controls around these job sites, I mean, just go, drive around Edgewater and take pictures. You're going to see, stormwater sewage entrances completely cluttered. They probably haven't replaced the riffraff in God knows how many years since they started the project. I'm sure we've all seen the social media posts of the debris going into the river, with the plume of mud. Unfortunately, I'd like to say that's not happening often, but it is. I mean, you can see it. Yeah. But in my comment I would make beyond that is that that's happening today during like a normal rainfall. Now, imagine when that water came onshore, where that debris is going to go. Right.
Right.
So if you can't control it now, how are you going to control it, come storm season?
Well, one of your slides had the Ready, Recover, Rebuild slogan, which is fantastic, right? So being ready is part of the sort of future proofing and making sure that we're investing in resiliency, both in the city infrastructure and on our personal properties and our commercial properties. Recovering, of course, that's sort of when things have happened and failed. And sometimes it's too late, right? Because, the wrong decisions were taken early on during the ready part, which is really building with durability and quality and good controls, right? Rebuilding, of course, it's a tragedy, right? It's sort of things happen and you have to come in and help rebuild. One of the things that I've been really pushing on the architecture community side is for us to be advocating for better quality in materials, the codification of materials that are appropriate, that the building code, as sometimes leaves out some critical issues concerning certain materials. Of course, when it comes to roofing and enclosure windows, the whole NOA that we have here in Dade County is sort of state of the art, compared to other locations. But we still see things where things are failing because of poor installation and poor quality control. And a lot of it, of course, has to do with the developer trying to push the timeline and deliver something, in an unnatural time frame that everybody has to sort of play along. So it seems like, the environment is full of these sort of challenges of defects and damages caused by, poor quality. So that seems to be a lot of the things that you're seeing. And unfortunately, on the building code side, as architects, the building code is sort of minimum standards. And a lot of times when we try to specify beyond the building code, which, from your perspective or an insurance company's perspective, it makes sense, right? The fact is that the building code is minimum standards, so the challenge is in sort of advising our clients early on to build with greater quality and greater specs. Obviously, that increases construction costs. and that becomes a big challenge, So, you're sort of looking at all this from the lenses of sometimes of recovery and rebuilding, and when things have failed, and that kind of brings a very interesting perspective to the question of resiliency.
Yep.
And I thought that was very refreshing, so I appreciate that. And of course, what I have seen in all my conversations with insurance companies and reinsurance guys is that they love when architects talk about resiliency, about elevating, about reducing risk. The problem is that sometimes the legislations, the codes out there don't really help much. It's sort of the architect against the forces of developers and those that are investing in new assets. Of course, if it's a personal home, a lot of times our clients are more open, to building a personal home with, better standards, right?
Yeah. And I would also add that I sometimes think, because insurance is not part of the discussion regarding resiliency, is that insurance kind of works against resiliency in a way. And because by specifying beyond the building code, it actually may, real simple terms, may increase project costs. And because of that project costs, you're then paying more for the insurance. And again, with the desire to get this done faster and cheaper through value engineering efforts or whatever it may be, maybe sometimes insurance doesn't understand that by specifying beyond the building code, we should actually see a rate reduction. And I think sometimes there's a struggle there between reality, and there's a hyper focus on just doing things the same way. And so by bringing insurance into this discussion earlier on, you might actually see a reduction in insurance expense and by proving to the insurance individuals that what you're doing is better than you're even required to. But I'll be honest with you, that a lot of the defect issues you're seeing, particularly in South Florida, that are discussed a lot in these articles, are stucco related. And they're because whereas stucco, which is also used prevalently in like Arizona, is a dry, less incremental weather environment. You don't have as much rain. It's very dry. We have a lot of rain and it's humid. And so I would say that not only is the installation of the stucco systems causing so much damage to neighboring properties due to a absolute failure and duty to protect, and installing safeguards and doing what they can, there's also on the flip side of that is that even when they're done destroying everything around the properties themselves are falling apart. So, and then which is leading to an increased amount of litigation and 558 issues, which, by the way, you keep hitting the insurance companies with these claims. Guess what? They want to make up for their losses. How do you make up for a loss? You increase the insurance. You restrict the coverage. Your adjusting practices shift. Your notice requirements increase. There was this shift towards OSIP and RAP policies to try to stop the fingerprint pointing. But if you read a lot of studies about where we are at with RAP policy and OSIPs, it's actually lending itself to more litigation than anything else. And it's becoming, the minimum insurance requirements are increasing. Some subcontractors can't even meet the minimum requirements, so they can't even do work. I mean, there's a bit of an issue going there because I don't really think that the insurance has entered the conversation early enough. And it's kind of like, oh, just hire the consultant or the broker will just find us something and we'll just focus on our job over here. But maybe if insurance is there, and that's the point of the presentation, right, is to bring insurance into the conversation regarding resiliency beyond the ground floor, okay? I understand the focus on the ground floor, but we need to look at what's going on outside of the footprint of our own building as well as above the ground floor.
Very well. Wayne, anything else? Mark, anybody else? Any questions for Daniel?
Yeah, I got a quick one for you, Dan. I'm interested in the pollution exclusion that you referred to earlier in your presentation. Great presentation, by the way.
Thank you. I hope it didn't bore anyone. I know insurance is not a very exciting, so I typically bring.
It was a little boring. It was a little boring. You need some special effects or something, I think.
I apologize. I'm not 100% right now. I'm maybe around 70, but Mark, go ahead. Ask your question. What's up?
So what's the decision process or the guidelines that are being used to turn something that's normally a valid claim into an exclusion under pollution? It's just an arbitrary thing?
It is beyond arbitrary. It's, I mean, to me, it's disappointing. Let me say it that way, because I mean, there's clear cut case law, policy conditions on these issues, and it's just, you just feel like the insurance companies are just, we believe they're going to come to the table. You know, because in every instance where they tried to take an adverse position, they did. But it's something to be aware of, because as they start to change their adjusting practices, right?
Yeah.
Fully expect them to change their policies, because that's typically the progression. They get sick and tired of paying something that they think that they can get away with excluding, and then next thing you know, they exclude it. And I would say hurricane claims, right? If a window didn't blow out, they don't want to pay your claim. But the fact of the matter is that if the gasket and the frame of my window torqued and bent and blew apart, in fact, we had 3 claims where insurance company literally wrote in their valuation that there was wind damage to the weather stripping gaskets and frames of windows, but claimed the whole claim was below deductible or not covered because the water that got in was from wind-driven rain. You know, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And who got the notice that suddenly hurricane damage was something other than hurricane damage? I can't find any association or business owner anywhere in South Florida that knew that it was coming. It was very surprising, but here's the thing. They fought the claims after Hurricane Wilma. We had a good decade or more of really no major storm that happened. Next thing you know, Irma hits. 2 years prior to Irma hitting is the first time that we see, based on research, that we see the limitation on wind-driven rain start getting added. I fully expect that we're going to start to see policies with something addressing construction debris and stuff. There was a case just recently in Miami-Dade with regards to dust, and it construed dust as, you know, as it argued that dust could not damage property. A restaurant owner sued because the insurance company denied their claim for construction debris that fell on the property, and they couldn't sit people outside because of the construction debris. And the insurance company actually denied the claim, claiming that dust or debris from a construction site is not causing physical damage. It's like, it's physically on the property. Yeah, like,
Indeed. Very interesting. So something just to kind of wrap it up, which may be not the best way to wrap up this because it's a complicated issue. As you know, Wayne and I sit on the City of Miami Resiliency Task Force, which is more of a resiliency committee now. And the city is investing now in a stormwater management plan, which comes out soon. So soon the city will start to budget adaptation projects that will help the city of Miami absorb more of the water, right, at all levels, right, and future-proof the city. A lot of these adaptations, like we've already seen in Miami Beach, that the city makes on public right-of-way, has unintended consequences of damage on the private property site.
Yep.
And I think that's an area perhaps that, you know, GlobalPro will have more and more involvement in sort of representing private owners from unintended consequences and damages that are the result of the city trying to do the right thing and
Yep.
trying to future-proof and trying to sort of upgrade things, whether it's, you know, racing streets and sidewalks or whatever the strategy is. How do you foresee that? You know, that's sort of a futurist question for GlobalPro.
Like I said, I get it. Getting insurance involved in the process earlier on, or discussion about it, looking at these proposed legislation changes and impacts on claims, knowing that these things are coming or that these adjusting practices are happening, if you will, you know, will help us plan differently for them, so that, you know, perhaps there's something that needs to change in the code in order to protect the properties or to establish liability. That's the other thing too, you know. It's one thing to put some, you know, to do some risk management and preventative measures. It's also something to talk about, you know, liability and clearly distinguishing that to mitigate the cost. That's the whole purpose of the 558 statute, right? But it's not really working that way, from my humble opinion. So, but, is there a discussion right now regarding, policies and how they respond to vibration damages, and is there protective measures in place to monitor the type of equipment that contractors are using and the distance it is from structures and the age of those structures? Like, is there ever a study done that says, hey, on this road, there's 3 homes that are from the 1920s that are not slab on grade, that have crawl spaces, that are on cinder blocks, that are, in tie beams? Like, those properties are going to respond very different than a slab on grade or something on piles, right? So, and there are properties, historical properties throughout Miami-Dade that are still built differently. And I would say that in our involvement in one such claim, there clearly was no consideration for the historical relevance of the building and the way in which it was built, because I don't think they would have ever driven the pneumatic compactor that close to the home. I mean, it seems stupid. And so I think, looking at those things differently and holding the contractors responsible. We understand that they want to complete their job to get paid. But if they take matters into their own hand and substitute equipment and don't take any sort of, that duty to care and institute it, what are the consequences to them? I mean, do they get to hide from it? We understand that progress is important. And I understand that, like any other developer or contractor and business owner, I want progress, but I also, we also want people to be responsible. And I think getting involved earlier in the conversation, thinking about things differently, and talking about the downhill consequences of some of this stuff. A lot of the bills that we see proposed for changes to policyholder rights are really geared towards South Florida on the policyholder side. So it's important that it's part of the planning process, that you understand, like when you're putting together a set of drawings or you're going for approval on a thing and there's a Senate bill being proposed with regards to how insurance is going to pay for a claim, you want to set your owner up for success, not failure. So maybe keeping the old roof wasn't a good idea, because the moment they have a claim, they're not going to get but a very small fraction of anything else. And by the way, your rates just went up 80% and your flood went up another 18%. And so you're paying way more for insurance and you're going to get nothing on your recovery. So, I think it needs to be part of the conversation when you're planning.
Very well. Well, thank you so much. I mean, any additional feedback that we'll receive through the chamber email, we'll forward it to you for potential more engagement. Presentation was amazing, well prepared, of course, and well executed, even though Wayne had a few critical notes there, but we know that he has very high expectations.
Yes, I'll bring more energy next time.
I think you were great. So
yeah.
Especially after your second shot, I'm getting mine next week, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, don't take it. I plan for it. Anyone that does it, give yourself a day. I'm struggling, so, but it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you everyone for those that tuned in, and we are here as a resource to you guys. I mean, anyone can call us. I mean, we want to continue to be involved and be part of the discussion. So thank you again for the invite, and anything we can do to help, please let us know.
Yes, I've also I discussed this with Matthew. If you're okay, of course, sharing this PDF that you presented today. So Enid has this PDF and it's available for anyone that would request it, correct? So,
yep.
So that will share your presentation and your contact as well. We have one minor business item as we close the meeting. Deanne has issued to us in the chat a link to the Survey Monkey. That survey is really about equity in the workforce, and the chamber is trying to do an evaluation of that critical issue for all of us, that are business owners and employing others. So take a look at it. I encourage you to participate in the survey. It means a lot to get everybody's input. And again, thank you everyone for joining us today for this interesting presentation. Daniel, superstar, thank you so much. And hope to collaborate with you on many projects in the future.
I hope so too.
Wayne, thank you again. And everybody stay safe and healthy, and we'll get over all this craziness soon.
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah.
Thank you,
Good
guys.
job,
anything
Reinaldo.
else?
Good job.
I need to jump in. Yes, one last thing. We have the Mentalist Show that's starting now at 6 p.m. It's going to be fun, magical, and very entertaining. So we definitely all need a little entertainment. So please join us for that.
Thank you, Enid.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right,
Take
take
care,
care, guys.
everyone.
Reinaldo, appreciate it.
Thank you.